Okay, Mark meets Nik Myers, the founder and owner of JPMH, who are currently celebrating their 10th birthday this month. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail as well. But Nik, can you just kind of introduce yourself and give us a quick summary of your career?
Sure. Hi, I'm Nik. I'm the managing director of JPMH. So I have that job, and as a day job, I'm also the concept director. So I guess I sit, interestingly, somewhere midway between planning and creative, and help inject ideas into the creative process. And it's quite an interesting role, and I'm enjoying it. It's the background and sort of story of my career. I guess it goes back kind of a long way these days. I started off in the music industry when I left university. I worked for kind of a big multinational, and then I worked for a smaller independent record label and management company.
What year was this roughly?
1988 I went and worked with Polygram, and then I moved to Fiction Records, which was sort of at that time famous for The Cure largely, and worked there for 2 or 3 years, and I had a marketing role, and then moved out of that in the early 90s and moved into agency world. I worked first at Marketing Drive, which was an offshoot of IMP, as a suit, and worked my way up through the kind of the usual greasy pole, I suppose, of account management. And then with some colleagues in the mid-90s, 1995, left Marketing Drive to be one of the founder directors of Dialogue. Dialogue were an integrated and sales promotion agency during the 90s. We were quite successful, quite well known, grew, and then end of the 90s we were lucky enough to be purchased by Ogilvy and WPP. And I jumped ship a bit at that time and moved into Ogilvy, where I had a couple of years, I guess ostensibly trying to digitise myself, and I worked within Ogilvy Interactive and learned as much as I could about the digital industry. And a couple of years after that, it was time to go and do my own thing again. I think I've always been... It's not that I'm so desperate to run my own company. It's more that I don't really like working for anybody else, so I'm not very good at working for anybody else. So it was back out to do my own thing again with 3 partners. We formed JPMH 10 years ago. So
where did you meet the 3 partners?
Richie Parsons and I have worked together right back since Marketing Drive. He's our exec creative director. Sam Jeffries also worked with us at Dialogue, and then Phil Harvey I met whilst at Ogilvy. So the 4 of us came together and started JPMH, and it's, I guess, been largely onwards and upwards since then, and we're now 10 years old.
Amazing, it's a nice story. How many people work here today?
About 50% of them. I guess... I think it's about 55. It seems to go, and you reach a certain size and you never quite know how many people are here, because it goes up and down on a daily basis or a weekly basis. It's give or take between 50 and 60. We're always looking for somebody new. There's always somebody moving on, so there's a bit of fluidity there. And that's here. And then we've got a small office with somebody in Switzerland, in Lausanne, and another small office in New Zealand. So a little bit of global reach.
And what would you say have been the main highs over the past 10 years?
Gosh, I think the thing about working in your own agency is that all the highs are really, really high, and all the lows are really, really low. It's very different from working for somebody else's company. So at any given minute, the best high is the latest high, and it's so much better than anything you've ever had before. except that you know that tomorrow there'll be some bad news on something and then you crash back down again. So you do have a sort of constant roller coaster.
So as a business owner, do you take it personally? Do you take the highs and lows personally?
Yeah, I do actually. I think you try not to, and you have to. You can't be too emotional about it, and you have to understand that you're making business decisions, and that sometimes you react to circumstances, sometimes you can plan sensibly through it. But yeah, I think you wear a little bit of your heart on your sleeve, and that's sort of my personality as well.
What would you say are the biggest changes then for the agency and, I guess, digital over the past 10 years?
So I think when we first got going, a lot of what we were doing was encouraging our clients. Most of our clients are large sort of blue chips. I guess those sorts of companies are sometimes quite conservative in what they do. So a lot of what we had to do was encourage people to embrace the medium and to explore and to experiment. And we were lucky because we had 2 or 3 clients, and certainly Nestle at that time, who were reasonably adventurous and were prepared to try things, and if it didn't work, so be it, at least it had been tried. I think clearly over the last 10 years, not only is there a greater understanding from a client perspective of what digital can mean for a brand or for an organisation, it's the explosion, the proliferation of different channels. It used to be digital was sort of a channel, and now it's not a channel. Now it's 50 channels. And in some ways we're almost doing the same job, but we're doing it on a micro level. Now we're encouraging people to experiment with everything from new social channels to new mobile functions to better use of video and whatever else. So yeah, I guess we try and get people to experiment with ideas and to slowly move the time forward. But we're not just a digital agency, we're an integrated agency. We work across all media. And so the changes are maybe a little bit in how we operate. We've grown up a bit. You start off with 4 people in a room and you behave in a certain way, and you're very proud of being small and independent. As you get bigger and your client relationships get bigger, you need to adjust your processes. You need to be able to behave in as if you're a larger organisation. But what's really important about a bunch of people like us is we have to retain the identity that's sort of the same as when there were 4 of us. You kind of lose something when we become a small, big agency. We'd rather be a big, small agency, if that makes sense.
And JPMH still independent?
Yeah, absolutely, and kind of fiercely so. We quite like our independence. It creates a million headaches every week, as I'm sure you know, but I quite like the fact that there are headaches.
Okay, what's the best thing about agency life for you?
I think it's variety. I think what I really enjoy about working in an agency is that we have a whole variety of clients who work in different sectors and categories, and I'm never really doing the same thing twice. Every time a new brief comes in, there's a new way of tackling it, and I'm not just ticking the boxes, and that means it's always challenging. I think it also means you get the chance to constantly learn something new every time you're dealing with a new client, or even a new project, a new challenge for a client. You sort of have to learn everything you can't learn as well as they do, but you have to become a very short-term expert. And I like that too. I like the sort of constant learning. And obviously, agency world, you work with some great people. I know it's populated by creative, confident, enthusiastic people, and that makes it worthwhile coming into the office every day.
What's the best bit of career advice you've been given?
I think, well, I remember years and years ago, a creative director in an agency I worked for used to always say that you need to give every piece of work that you do the mum test, which essentially involves showing it to your mum, and if she gets it, understands it, appreciates it and thinks it's good, even if it's just a contact report, then then it's a good piece of work. From my perspective, I think personal pride is the most important thing. I think there is nothing worse than ever hearing the phrase, it's good enough for the client. Every piece of work we do has to be good enough for us, and it has to be good enough for the person who's doing it. They have to. The most important thing on a document that gets sent out, or a design that gets delivered to a client, or a conceptual idea, is not actually the fact that it says JPMH somewhere at the top of it. It's that it's got the name of the person or the people who came up with that thought at the bottom of it. And it's their pride in what they're sharing with the client, that it's good enough for them, that makes it great work, I think.
What's the best account you've worked on in your career so far?
Well, obviously, I'd have to say the accounts that I work on at the moment. I don't know, I've worked on quite a variety. I spent a lot of time in the 90s working with Hasbro, and I really enjoyed working on Action Man and Transformers and brands like that. We had a lot of fun doing things like that. I've worked with BlackBerry for a while, and I enjoy working in I enjoy technology sector. I enjoy the fact that kind of new functions, new features, new products are coming out all the time. We're working with Google at the moment, and I quite enjoy that for the same reason. Every client's kind of got something new and different. There have been one or two that perhaps I haven't enjoyed as much, but I wouldn't admit to that.
If you could turn back time on your career, what would you do differently, if anything?
I'm not necessarily sure I would do anything particularly different. I'm happy with where I am and where the agency is now. I think on any individual project or challenge that you face, you get 20/20 hindsight, and you think, well, we could have done it that way, and that might have worked better, and there are always missed opportunities, and frankly, there's loads of things you get wrong. But I think if you're happy where you've ended up, give or take, then why would you want to go back and reverse the clock?
So, obviously you guys are celebrating your 10th birthday this month. What advice would you give to people who are either setting up their agency this year for when they get to become 10 years old, or agencies that are maybe kind of halfway through that journey at the moment and maybe thinking about selling or kind of changing the direction of the agency? Because obviously you've gone through a lot of kind of highs and lows and process and thought and over the years.
I think there's something very important about the spirit and culture of a small or growing agency that's important. It's not just important actually to the agency and the people who work in it, it's quite important to the clients as well. It tends to be part of what they buy into. So I think necessarily when an agency starts, the character of the agency and its culture are somewhat determined by the founders of the company, largely because at the beginning that's all there is. And as the company grows, it's really important to work hard to retain whatever that culture is, because suddenly you can't touch every aspect of the agency. And I don't just mean the culture of going on ski trips and going down the pub on a Friday, the culture of how people work, about how they support each other. I mean, we speak lots about the need for people to see their colleagues as that they're working for their colleagues, in a sense, that the reason you stay late when a client asks is because you're helping out all those other people who are working on the same project. You're not doing it for the agency per se, you're doing it for your friends who you work with. And that sense of a kind of shared identity is quite important. You know, there are times when you need to be very much us against the world as a smaller agency, so retaining that and not losing it as you grow, I think is really important to maintaining the growth, because if clients bought it at the beginning, they will continue to build it or to buy it. All you're doing is adding services, expertise, experience on top of that. So I think that's important. I think no matter how small you are, it helps to have a plan, to have really clear goals. I think sometimes we've had really clear goals and sometimes they haven't always been as clear as they might be, and we've always moved forward quicker when our goals have been clear and aligned, and we all know what we're heading for and aiming for. I think those are probably the two most important aspects, kind of being true to yourself as a set of individuals who set the company up in the first place.
If you weren't in this industry, what do you think you'd be doing?
I don't know. When I was at college, I kind of wanted to work in the Foreign Service, and I thought that looked good. Probably because of just a sort of sense of glamour and travelling the world. But I think that's obviously long gone, and I could never go back to that. I'd quite like to go back to academics in some point or another. I'd like to go back to college and do a PhD or something like that. But sort of, I've thought about it, and I can't really think of anything else I'd really like to do more than I do. I'm very lucky. We do a great job in an agency. Most people would love to do what we do for a living, and I feel quite privileged to be a part of the industry.
What are your interests outside of work?
Well, I'm married, I've got a family, I've got children of 2 boys of 14 and 12, so a lot of my interests outside of work involve sitting in a car and driving them from one place to another. I spend inordinate amount of times on the touchline, cheering or decrying whatever's going on, and that takes up a lot of time. I'm quite a keen cyclist, so I try and get out on my bike quite a lot. It's a chance to do a bit of exercise because I don't get much during the week, but as I'm sure you can tell, it doesn't always work. And then I guess just like everybody else, I love a bit of creative inspiration. I like film.
Who inspires you?
Again, that's a really difficult question to answer.
Are there people in film, in art?
I don't think it's necessarily individuals. I like taking in a bit of everything, and it's not just contemporary. I enjoy reaching back, looking at what works in the 13th century as well as what works in the 21st century. I love the pictures, the imageries, the words, and just sort of losing myself in it a bit, and that helps. But I guess, generally speaking, I'm no different from other people who enjoy this business. We like the opportunity to mix the science and the creativity together, and you can get inspired for that from all sorts of places. Just walking down the street and seeing somebody else's great billboard and thinking, God, I wish I had thought of that.
What does the next 10 years for JPMH look like?
That's where I need to go back to having a plan, I think that we don't necessarily have I think anybody who tells you they've got an absolute plan of what they're doing over the next 5 to 10 years is simply lying. We like doing what we do, and our ambition has always been to continue to grow an organisation and a company. We've begun to grow internationally now as well, that we enjoy working for and that people enjoy working for. And so we have an intention to continue to grow at the general rate that we have done so far, but to try and retain the good things about being an agency of this size. Whether that means that we can retain that culture as we grow to 100 people, or whether that means we need to diversify ourselves a little bit and sit in smaller, more specialist pockets, I'm not sure. But more of the same is certainly kind of top of the agenda.
Okay, let's move on to a quick fire round.
Okay.
Can line or D&AD pencil?
D&AD pencil.
Olympic gold medal or an Oscar?
Olympic gold medal.
The brightest person you've worked with?
I've worked with so many bright people it wouldn't be fair to pick on one.
The most creative person you've worked with?
Well, I've worked with my current colleague Richie Parsons for 20 years, so I guess that says something about how we think of each other.
And the best looking person you've worked with?
I don't think I can possibly answer that question.
Creatives or suits?
I've been both. So, at the moment creatives, but last year suits.
Money or happiness?
Happiness.
Apple or Android?
Apple.
Degree or no degree?
Degree.
Art directors or copywriters?
Yeah, there's no choice. They fit together, don't they?
Safe answer. Retained work or pitch work?
Retained work.
Web or mobile?
Mobile.
Independent agencies or networked agencies?
Independent agencies.
Outsourced production or on-site production?
Depends on what you're producing.
Don Draper or Roger Sterling?
Don Draper.
And lastly, twist or stick?
Stick.
Thank you very much.